All right, Jayce. Appreciate you hopping on, man. This is awesome. I know we had talked about again. When I was a guest on your episode, you and we had talked about doing this for a while. So now, returning the favor, getting you on an episode of their story. I'm excited. I'm pumped. I think we have a lot of great stuff to talk about. So I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, of course. First off, appreciate you having me on the show. Like you said, when you came on my episode, we definitely talked about this, and we've talked about it for, probably a couple months now when we first kind of got connected. So, been looking forward to this for a while. A little bit nervous being on the other side of the interview instead of asking the questions, kind of answering them. But, definitely excited, definitely to get rolling into it.
Yeah, and it is a different dynamic too, because as a podcast host, we're probably talking maybe 10% of the episode. So to kind of have the roles reversed, it's a different dynamic for sure.
Yeah.
And I just want to provide some background. I think it was a few months back, maybe early summer, late spring-ish. You had reached out to me and we got connected pretty much right away, hopped on a phone call and started talking about some of the things that you were doing with JKR Baseball and the JKR Podcast, and was what I'm doing here on their story, and also as a career, right, with Prep Baseball Report. We kind of started talking about what we had going on, and so that's pretty much how we got connected, and it turned into this, which is honestly exciting because this is my first collab, and I know you're kind of doing it with some other outlets too, which is awesome and something that we'll talk about. But this is, my first collab, so yeah, it's exciting stuff for me. And you did give me a chance to, talk about myself and give myself, give some background on myself, and I want to give you the same opportunity. So, who is Jayce, and also who is Jayce when the microphones are turned off, when you're not working, which is almost never. And we'll get into that. But who is Jayce when the mics are turned off, and who is he as a person?
Okay. Well, all right. Well, to get started, I guess I'm a senior at Indiana University. From Indiana. Started off from a very small town. So moving here 4 years ago to Bloomington was a big thing. And at that moment in time, knew I wanted to be an agent, but wasn't sure what sport at that moment. Hadn't started the podcast yet, so really I was coming here, no, kind of knew what I wanted to do career wise, but didn't have 100% what direction I wanted to go in. From there, I guess I'm an aspiring MLBPA certified agent. Again, a senior in college, and once this next May comes around and during graduation, hopefully I can get kind of started into that career. I feel like I'm in a good spot right now. Having this podcast, having my internships, and having a lot of good relationships. But I'm just a guy from a small town, loves baseball, loves sports in general, love building relationships with different people. That's kind of me in a nutshell when it comes to, I guess, off the mic. I knew you were going to ask that a little bit. Do you want me to just dig into it now? I know that was
Yeah, let's dig into it. No, let's
all right.
let's get into it.
All right. So I wasn't sure if you wanted me to be a little just small little elevator pitch on who I am, but I guess I'll kind of dig into just me as a person. Like I said, small town, moved here. Living in a small town, came from the bar industry. My parents have owned bars my entire life. They've been in the business for 28 years or something crazy like that. Ended up opening their first bar 3 weeks after I was born. So they kind of opened the bar as I was born, and have always been in the industry. So grew up in the bar business. With my parents, I was like a little second grader running around, kind of talking to people, which is kind of weird seeing a little second grader running around a bar restaurant talking to all the customers. But that's kind of me as a little kid. They ended up having that bar, ended up opening two more there throughout my childhood. So again, that was a big part of after school every day I'd be going into the when I say bar, it's like a restaurant with very good food, and also has a good selection of beer, bourbon, all that different types of stuff. So it's not like what you're thinking in terms of an actual bar. So, after school we'd be going there,
So you weren't clubbing in second
no, I
grade?
was not
No.
not clubbing in second grade, but I was, definitely in, the public's eye. Obviously from a small town, with there not being too many people, everyone kind of knows everybody, so that kind of was able for me to grow a lot of relationships there. But beyond that, beyond the relationships I have with my parents and all different types of stuff, was a two-sport/three-sport athlete in throughout my entire childhood. Football, obviously baseball, then basketball, which basketball is another love of mine beyond the game of baseball. But like I said, wanted to be an agent from a very young age. Knew kind of always had a plan on what I wanted to do. Wasn't sure going into like my junior senior year what school I wanted to go to. I did know that I wanted to get out of a small town, at least there for a little bit, and kind of expand, kind of get a little different viewpoint on life. I always enjoyed traveling and different things like that. But once I did decide to go to IU, really followed them in terms of all the different types of sports. And, it was actually COVID was my senior year. And as soon as COVID hit, I ended up reaching out to pretty much everybody in the Indiana athletic directory trying to get a job within sports at IU. So I guess that kind of talks about, the work ethic that you talked about, which I appreciate you, giving me that type of love when it comes to the whole work ethic side of things. Obviously, I'm not working all the time. So I'm not going to like play it off and lie to you that, I'm working all the time, never having any fun and stuff like that. But when it comes to maybe some, I guess, hobbies that I enjoy doing, and this is some of the stuff that I kind of picked up after my, high school athletic career, after, moving here, definitely became a big podcast listener. I know I do host my own podcast now, but I do listen to a couple different podcasts. Real AF, Andy Frisella is probably the biggest one that I'm listening to. Not sure if you've heard of them, but he's a entrepreneur from Missouri. That's probably the guy that I'm listening to probably 4 or 5 days a week. I like to kind of stick to a routine. Obviously, the routine's not as crazy as what you'd think in terms of like, waking up at 4 a.m. It's more like waking up at 6:45 a.m. and stuff like that and kind of sticking to it. But, like listening to podcasts, like working out, big lifting weight type of guy. As much as I don't like cardio. I know I have to do it. I'm a bigger guy, so I kind of, to stay in shape and stay somewhat, fit, kind of have to mix in cardio there as well. Let's see. I guess, again, with me off the mic, I love traveling. Haven't traveled to, crazy amount of places, kind of always kind of stayed here in the United States, but went to a bunch of different places. And that's kind of like a big reason for me wanting to be a baseball agent. Well, I guess an agent in general, because you're constantly traveling. Obviously this past summer, went down to North Carolina, have been down to Atlanta there a couple times, but have always been big into traveling and, big country music fan as well. Big time Luke Combs, Morgan Wallen, Jason Aldean. I like mixing it up with maybe a little bit of 90s rap there as well. So I guess that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah. And you've hit on a few different topics that we're going to get into, and thank you for that intro. It was a good precursor to some of those topics we'll talk about, things like an aspiring MLB PA agent, the work ethic, the restaurant industry. But let's rewind maybe 10, 15 years ago. You had said early on, I had kind of read some stuff on your website, which, I'll link everything, your podcast, your website, and and all the descriptions in this episode. But you knew pretty early on that you wanted to be an agent. I guess sitting in your seat now, looking back 10, 15 years ago, does everything that has been laid out, the podcast, the collabs, the interviews, the relationships, the experience that you're getting, does that all kind of, does it make sense now, right? Like you look back and everything seems to kind of be lining up the way you maybe had originally wanted, maybe better than you had originally wanted. Is where you're at right now with everything that you're working on, everything you're doing, kind of falling in line with what, Jayce maybe in middle school, junior high, early high school was looking forward to?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, like, I mean, I think I'm in a very good spot. Like, I don't want to be like, sound cocky or arrogant in any sort of way whatsoever. I know there's a lot of stuff that I still need to do, still need to learn, and to even get started in my career as a baseball agent after graduation. When it comes to everything lining up, and I guess from probably what you read, my website says I wanted to be an agent since 8th grade. That was always the dream. It was always, I wanted to work in sports. It was around 7th grade, 8th grade, where it kind of hit, where I had a conversation with my parents. We were talking about Scott Boras, which is my dad's never really been a big fan of Scott Boras. I never really understood why, because I mean, he's making money for the players, advocating for all these different athletes within Major League Baseball. And that's kind of when I started following that, kind of started following free agency, and that's kind of where that love came in. And love also kind of came through following prospects within minor league baseball. I'm from the Fort Wayne area, so always going and seeing Fernando Tatis was rolling through single A there at the time when I was, starting to get into it. Mackenzie Gore, who was the 3rd overall pick there at that time as well. But in terms of like everything lining up, when I did there at the very early beginning, obviously, and I'm sure this is probably normal for a lot of people, like I knew what I wanted to be, but I didn't really know how to get there. Like for me as a little kid, as let's say freshman, sophomore, junior, and for the most part of my senior year of high school, like I knew I wanted to be an agent. I knew that I had to try to get an internship and stuff like that, but I didn't really know beyond that. I guess what I'm trying to say here is when I was in high school, like I was trying to write these business plans about how I was going to be a MLB agent, an NBA agent, NFL. I was going to represent guys in the Canadian Football League and G League too. Like I was just going to try and represent everybody in every league. And going into my freshman year, that was a big thing that I learned, was that's not doable. Like there's no way. I mean, there's very few agents that do 2 leagues, and I mean to do 2 leagues, I can't even imagine when it comes to having all the different types of connections. Let's say for a guy who's doing football and baseball, trying to build connections with scouts in both leagues, try to build connections with people in the front office in both leagues as well. Realized that my freshman year, I kind of went into this Grady Agent Academy, which again is listed on my website in terms of like the story of that. I was scrolling through LinkedIn one day, and this guy named Joshua Grady kept posting about this Agent Academy. So I kind of looked up into what exactly Grady Sports Agency is and what exactly this Agent Academy was trying to do. And that's when I signed up for that. And week 1 was kind of when it hit me, like, okay, like being a multiple sport agent is just not doable. Like he kind of talked about it there as well on some of the points I brought up, but he just talked about how difficult it is to break into this industry anyway. And once that kind of happened, wasn't really sure what sport I wanted to get into. Wasn't sure if it was basketball, football, or baseball I wanted to break down into. And I spent probably 6 or 7 months kind of trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to be. I mean, at that point, I had internships with a basketball agency, with a 2 internships with a basketball agency, and 1 internship with a football agency. And, trying to learn those industries, it was great. I kept thinking, okay, like this is going to be for me. This is for me, this and that. And it was really 2021 spring training when I realized that, baseball is probably the sport I want to solely focus on, just dig as deep as possible into that kind of, me as a freshman in college looking now, I mean, I feel like I'm in a good spot. Like, I mean, I'd be like, oh, shoot, that's cool what I've done the past couple of years. But at that moment in time, spring training 2021, just kind of realizing that excitement that I had for that spring training, turning on MLB Now, the 30 teams in 30 days and different stuff like that, and watching just all those spotlights on different teams. And it's springtime, it's starting to get nice outside, no longer having to wear those jackets, kind of start wearing cut off shirts and shorts from then on out. Like it was kind of just like, like for me being the happiest, I think baseball is going to be that sport. And that's kind of where a lot of my knowledge came from as well. Like I said earlier, was always big into Scott Boras. That's kind of where that love of being an agent, that dream of becoming an agent kind of came from. Again, following MLB Pipeline and all these different, high school prospects getting drafted year after year. I don't know, kind of just noticed that, wanted to be a baseball agent. And that's kind of when I went full, just dug deep into building connections, building a network, and trying to build as big as knowledge as when it comes to the MLB draft and all these different things within the game of baseball.
I think a huge underlying foundation in kind of your story, your upbringing, and where you are now and where you're going to go is this entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. I want you to touch on that a little bit, and I think I'm going to look up in my notes here because I want to get this right. I had read on your website, I believe, that someone had asked you pretty early on, I think when you were younger, if you were going to take over the family business or which family business maybe you'd wanted to take over, and you had said you wanted to build something of your own. And that, I think, explains a lot about you and your vision, your drive, your motivation. So take me back to that moment. I mean, you must have known early on that maybe you didn't know what it was, but you wanted something of your own, and I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, so actually, I can kind of remember that the first conversation I had with somebody about that. So, throwing it back there to again second, third grade, walking around my parents' restaurant bar as a little kid, going to lunch there with my grandpa, who he's an entrepreneur as well. Has own he grew a 100-acre farm to a bigger farm. He grew a farm pretty big. Spent 65 years in the farm business, waking up at 4 a.m. doing all that different types of stuff. So, I always heard great stories from my parents about him, always heard great things about, all my grandparents when it comes to their entrepreneurial spirit. All my other side of my family also had, their own business as well. And then again, with my parents' bar as well, people are always talking about, especially in a small town, it's pretty common for a kid to take over their parents' business, whatever it ends up happening to be. And someone asked me that, and I was like, neither. I'm not going to be a farmer. I'm not going to be a bar owner. And obviously, at that moment in time, I didn't know I was going to be an agent. At that time, I think I kind of wanted to be like I wanted to be president at that time. But obviously, that's kind of gone by the wayside. But no, I just kind of realized that I kind of want to build something of my own. Didn't want to take something over because I kind of wanted to prove that I was worth it. And I guess always in the back of my head, I guess if something is built beforehand and I kind of take it over, then I didn't really build that, and maybe that's just me thinking that maybe that's just me wanting, I guess, more credibility from myself personally, like holding myself to a standard where, I want to make sure that it's something that I built, something that I'm not just being handed over and given, it's something that I actually earned. So I guess that's kind of where that entrepreneur spirit comes from in terms of, maybe not taking something over, but actually starting something on my own. And again, at third grade, I didn't know I wanted to be an agent, but I guess that was kind of the conversation that when I was writing up that little thing on my website, that was kind of the conversation I was thinking of.
Yeah, again, I think that speaks volumes. And another thing I want to bring up, again, looking at my notes because I want to get this right, is you had raised, I think there was an event that you had hosted or you were a part of in high school, I believe, and you had raised something like $5,200 for charity. Talk about that because I thought that was incredibly interesting as I was kind of going through your whole story here, prepping for this.
Okay, yeah. So the whole background on that, it was like my end of my junior year, and again, me wanting to be an agent but not knowing what sport I was. Every time I connected on LinkedIn with an agent or saw someone on Twitter, Instagram, gave them a follow, and just doing the whole little thing that a lot of high school, college students do, reaching out, asking for advice. And there's this one agent, it always kind of stuck with me. I kind of printed it out and put it on my wall. Was, if you want an internship once you do get to college, try to do as many it was a baseball agent, so he said do as many baseball projects as you can. So at that time I'm thinking I'll write a couple articles about some draft prospects, this and that. And going into my senior year, one thing that my high school does really well is project-based learning, and we had this class called a senior project. And a lot of people do little small charities, or there's a car show, lots of cool different things when it comes to that. And I was like, okay, this is my perfect opportunity to do that. Wasn't sure, kind of spent a couple weeks in terms of, should I do maybe a conference basketball all-star game, or, whatever it ended up being. I tried to do a celebrity home run derby with Jose Canseco. I know you can rent Jose Canseco for the day. And I was like, okay, well, it cost $8,000 to get him. So let's try to raise money to get him here. How cool would it be for a town of 5,000 people to have Jose Canseco here? And kind of realized that, okay, that's probably not going to work. So let's try to do maybe something that, you know, brings out the pride of different towns in the area and something that's maybe a little bit more doable. So me and this guy that I did the project with, we talked about all these different ideas, and we talked about a home run derby with guys from our conference. So our conference, being in Indiana, I mean, it's a little bit spread out. Like going from one side of the conference to the other is probably like an hour. So like that was in question as well. But we decided to do this conference home run derby. It was called the NECC Home Run Derby. So then from there, it was like obviously trying to raise money, and we did partner with this company this nonprofit called Hello Gorgeous. They help out women with cancer, in terms of like helping them with makeovers and stuff like that, and help them raise their self-esteem and raise their self-confidence as they're going through all these different chemo cancer battles and stuff like that. So once we figured that out, kind of went about okay, who do we need in this home run derby? Looking up max preps, who was the leaders in home runs this past year and who's returning, and texting different baseball coaches, hey, who do you recommend for this home run derby that we're doing? So kind of went about that. Actually scheduled it for in season, which ended up realizing once we announced it that the IHSAA is totally against that. So we had to kind of scramble and try to reschedule it, before it got too cold outside in the fall time. So got that done in November. It was a little breezy day, but was able to, like you said, $5,200. A lot of that kind of came from sponsors, and that was a big place where I grew, was just cold walking into a business and kind of giving them a pitch. Hey, here's this and this option. Here's the event we're running. Would love for you to be a sponsor, donor, whatever, and support this cause. That was a big way we earned money. Another way was selling shirts. Another way was donations at the door, and then we sold tickets. I think it was for like $3 each or something like that. But ended up selling, I think it was like 350 tickets. Like 275 people showed up. So that's, I would say pretty solid for a small little baseball field, having 275 people there. Had a food truck there. Pretty cool event that we put on, and that was kind of where the whole event management that now I kind of run with JKR Baseball as well. That's kind of where that love came from, was just like kind of running the show, making being behind the scenes, making sure everything kind of is smooth and everything's working out. That was the NECC Home Run Derby I did my senior year.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I think, again, it just goes back to, building something of your own, or being a part of something that's even bigger than you, I think is awesome. And it speaks to, I think that translates to some of the things you're working on now, which I want to get into. The JKR Podcast, JKR Baseball. Not only is it a podcast, you're also, hosting events and stuff like that. You're collabing with other outlets, and which I think is awesome. And really, I'm going to give you a chance to brief everyone on the JKR podcast, because I won't do it justice in my own words. But what I've seen out of it is awesome. And you're interviewing players, coaches, scouts, any type of kind of baseball personnel. And these are really good conversations. There's a lot of good insight. I think being on this side of what I do at Prep Baseball Report, I'm watching a lot of players. We go through, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of players every single year. But with that, I don't get to converse with them as much as I would like to. I probably talk to more parents than I do players. So in getting to listen to the JKR podcast, hearing what, the conversations you're having with them, the questions, how they answer the questions is almost eye-opening for me. It's like, okay, so that's what they're thinking, or that's what they're going through, or that's what they're maybe thinking at the plate, or that's how their recruiting process is going. Being in my seat, again, the vast number of players that I see, I almost don't get that personal relationship like you're hitting on. So I think, listening to the conversations that you're having has been insightful for me. So what else is the JKR podcast? Like, what else do people need to know about what you're building, what you're putting together? Because you're, 300 plus, 330 episodes in? I mean, that's no small number. So, it's a foundation that's been there for a while, and it's growing.
Yeah, so I guess I do kind of want to throw it back there to the beginning of the JKR podcast, and I want to shout out that Grady Agent Academy again. Like that's kind of where the whole idea of starting the podcast came from. It was like one of our classes, our the agent who was there, Joshua Grady, who if he ever does ends up if he and I haven't talked to him in a while, but if he sees this, listens to this, I mean, there's so many things I'm thankful for him and kind of what everything I learned during that Agent Academy. One of the lessons that he went through was building a brand, personal brand. I know you said you wanted to touch on that later, but he did talk about as an agent you want to build your brand that way. Let's say when you are reaching out to these different athletes in a couple of years, probably one of the first things they're going to do is try to go look you up on Twitter, go look you up on Instagram, because that's just the way it is nowadays in terms of looking up people. So I always kind of figured, okay, I got to build a brand. He talked about building a podcast as well, is a great way to build a brand. And at that moment in time, it wasn't like I wasn't thinking about interviewing baseball prospects. I was thinking about interviewing people in different aspects of life, different aspects of sports, just so people could come on, listen to me, and get to know me personally. That was kind of that, like kind of just see the type of person I am, the way that I have conversations with people. That was like the first. That was like the first 30 some episodes was me just talking to people in different aspects of life, and that kind of evolved a little bit. Again, that was kind of the same time period and the same timeline as me realizing that baseball was going to be my main source of that was going to be the sport I wanted to dig deep in. And it was probably I think it was episode 35. That was episode 1 of season 2. I was able to get Max Clark on the episode. Obviously, him having, I think it's 400 and some thousand Instagram followers now. At the time, I think he had 80 some, which is still crazy. Had him, Walter Ford, who was a first round supplement pick that same year as well. Had them on week 1 of season 2. And from there, just started getting followers from Nash Wagner, Ahmad Duff, both Alabama commits. TJ Schuyler, who's now a freshman here at IU. There was a couple other guys in the minor leagues in terms of Bryce Wyndham, who's in the Cubs system, who should be called up probably opening. I'm hoping he might be that backup opening day catcher next year. A couple other guys in different organizations as well. But, as I kept getting all these different baseball prospects on, more and more guys started following me. And I was like, you know what? Let's kind of stick away. Let's stay away from interviewing people in other sports or just, I've had people on who I had a fashion designer on the podcast, I think episode 3. So imagine me doing that now with the type of with the type of niche followers that I have, trying to get a fashion designer on. But once I started getting followers from those different episodes, kind of just kept reaching out to, ended up being guys from across the country, different guys who were already in college, guys in minor league ball as well, and then started moving it down to guys who were playing top tier travel ball, and that's where I kind of got connected with PBR and Indiana Bulls, Canes Midwest, and stuff like that. Was just all the followers I was getting from those types of episodes, and it just kept growing and growing, and started getting more connections with the Arkansas Sticks, Canes National with Jeff Petty and Jarrett Mustaine and Artillery, and I mean every time I post an episode, and obviously with this new Illinois series that I announced a couple weeks ago, that got me a lot of new followers in terms of guys who were from the state of Illinois. Obviously, that's huge thanks to you. Connect me with a lot of guys there as well. But just the more connections that I gained, the more I realized, okay, with me wanting to be an MLBPA certified agent, having this podcast is going to be very beneficial because it's going to allow me to connect with as many ball players, connect with as many top tier travel organizations, and connect with different baseball businesses as well. Because of this, getting them on a 45-minute hour episode, building that relationship with them, having a good conversation, providing them value before they even provide me value at all. I mean, that's, great in terms of, building that relationship with them, and then overall building that network. Because like I said, I get one guy on, I feel like 3 of their friends are following me, and then that just gives me more avenues to reach out to. So I guess one recent example had Ezra S6 on the JKR podcast last night. And
Oh man,
with that came,
I was gonna recommend him. I was gonna recommend him because I saw your post looking for some recommendations, and I was like, okay, so he just transferred, I believe, to P27. So I was like, well, I don't know if he'll fit the Illinois series, but man, he's a dude, man. I love that kid.
Yeah, so with Ezra came Sir Jameson Jones, who's coming on the podcast tonight. And then we got Connor Essenberg as well. So, next week, haven't announced it yet, but those are going to be the 3 guys on the Illinois Baseball Series next week. But again, that's just an example of, I get one guy on, it just kind of continues to build the network, continues to build the brand. And again, with me trying to be an agent, I think that's just as beneficial as possible with me building relationships with ball players, with coaches. I mentioned Jeff Petty there, Coach Brewster with the Arkansas Sticks, guys like you, Cooper Trinkle, Phil Wade there with PBR Indiana as well. I mean, just the more relationships that I build through this podcast, I think the more beneficial it's going to be for me and the more beneficial it's going to be for my future clients.
On those relationships and on those connections, you'd mentioned, which I think is a great sentiment, is providing them value before, they could, or providing them some value before they can maybe return the favor. What value have they provided? Maybe not so much tangible, but maybe it's the experience, maybe it's the conversation, maybe it's, 300 episodes ago, this was something new to you. So having guys like, Max Clark, Walter Ford, these guys being, willing to have conversations, I'm sure helped you in terms of, asking questions and forming an interview and forming a conversation and an episode. So I think those are the things that we maybe can't see that are beneficial. What other things doesn't have to be, maybe it's tangible, maybe it's just, like I said, some of those things that we can't see. What are these connections? What are these interviews, these episodes provided you along the way so far?
Yeah, so I actually was thinking about that last night, talking about Ezra. We had it was like a 20, 25-minute conversation off air after the podcast, just talking about different things about baseball. And I was thinking about, imagine me 2 years ago, the day I interviewed Max Clark, having that conversation with Ezra. Like, I would have no clue what I'm talking about. So going into, let's say, that first weekend with Walter Ford, with Max Clark there, first weekend of season 2, I didn't know what the Indiana Bulls were. And they're one of the top organizations in the country. So me trying to be a baseball agent, not knowing who the Indiana Bulls are, or Canes Baseball, Canes Midwest, not really knowing beyond that PBR showcases players what exactly PBR's role is. I mean, imagine that guy trying to become a major league agent. Like, it just wouldn't happen. Like, the knowledge and this is something that just slowly builds over time. All the different stuff I'm learning from different guys. Like, again, obviously those guys there at the beginning, like Max Clark, like Walter Ford, all those different guys. Like, I was able to learn more and more about the travel organizations that they're a part of, more and more about the personal showcase life when it comes to PDP, area code, East Coast Pro, all those different showcases, all those different travel events throughout the summer, like Cary, like the WWBA, like Lake Point, futures games as well. I had no clue what those things were. And again, that just slowly builds over time. The more conversations I have with guys like you and Cooper, the more I learn about that type of stuff. But also the more conversations I have with, Ryan Sloan and Jack Bauer, for example, a couple weeks ago. Those are the first 2 guys I've had on who were part of that top tier program. And it kind of allowed me to learn more about top tier. And actually, before this episode got started, Jack was texting me about the best guys to reach out for top tier. Because again, trying to make those relationships with guys with some of the best organizations in the country, it just slowly builds in terms of building knowledge within the game of baseball. Obviously helps, the conversation skills as well. Again, with me in the public as a little kid, I always feel like I was pretty good at speaking to the public, but also having these random conversations with people I've never met before. That also, is a challenge as well in terms of having conversations, initiating that conversation. And that's kind of another small thing that just slowly builds over time.
What personality traits do you have that have helped you along the way, or maybe you've gained along the way because of what you're doing? What personality traits do you have, and maybe where did they begin? I know we had touched on, the restaurant industry and your parents, and I think that provides a lot of context. When I look at Jayce and I see, and I see what I see the product he's putting out, I see the projects he's working on, putting together, and then you tell me about your parents and the, entrepreneurs, then it all starts to make sense. What other personalities do you have? And then along those lines, you're going to be wanting, athletes to want you to represent them. So what do you have that you think best suits you to be in your position now and moving forward?
All right, so I mean, I'm sure people are probably tired of hearing me talk about my parents' bar, and again, I'll be forever thankful for the experience I got from all three of those different places. They all kind of came at different points in my life, but again, me being in the service industry, because once I did get old enough, actually became an actual employee of the restaurant in terms of middle school, actually going and hosting, bussing tables, and again, talking with customers to where I'm at now with being a bartender, being a server. The service industry is the service industry. Being an agent, you're servicing your clients. Being a bartender and server, you're servicing the customers. And one big thing I saw Rich Paul actually talk about, I was listening to some podcast he was on. He was like, for everyone who's trying to become an agent, go work in the service industry. Because overall, I mean, you're going after and you're trying to provide the best value for those people. Again, in the bar industry, you're providing it to the customers. In the agent industry, you're providing it to your athletes. So, that's one big thing. Also, another thing that I learned from a very young age was always sticking to your word. I always think that's big when it comes to whatever it is in life, whether that's, having a company. I know I was talking to a founder / CEO the other day, and he was talking about how he builds company culture is sticking to his word. What he says, he's going to do. And I try to do the same thing. Let's say, like I said, I had 8 interviews scheduled on top of this for the week, and I schedule them about a week in advance. And I always try to if I schedule it, that's what I'm doing at that moment in time. I'm not going out and let's say my friend, for example, tonight I got an interview at 8:30. My friends are inviting me out to Thursday night, go to the bar, but I'm telling them no because, I got to make sure that I, get that interview in because I'm sticking to my word, sticking to the plan. And overall, I think that's very beneficial. Again, the relationships that I'm building with players and coaches, that's another thing. Because, I think with me being a little bit younger, obviously I'm a little bit more inexperienced and let's say there's some guys from the bigger companies going after some of these guys who do have a little bit more experience than I do. They might not connect on the personal level to a lot of these guys. And one big thing that I have learned from, I do ask some of those guys, what are you looking for when these draft advisors and agents are reaching out? They talk about being able to have an actual conversation with their draft advisor, with their agent, and actually talking about stuff beyond baseball and, connecting with them. I've heard rough stories about guys who, there's a draft advisor who's reached out to me who's, just some old school, like all business, all baseball type of guy. And he just doesn't really connect on the personal level. It kind of seems like he's talking to Chat GPT was a thing that they used. Was just some guy who, he's constantly saying the same thing, which I guess sometimes on the podcast, I do say a lot of the same stuff because a lot of the guys are in their same stages of their career. But just, being able to have a conversation, being able to have good relationships. And again, on top of those relationships, like I talked about earlier, all the relationships I'm building with guys like from you guys for PBR, with Perfect Game, with all these travel organizations. I'm bringing on a couple guys from the Future Star Series on the podcast as well in a couple weeks. Having those relationships as well, I think that's very beneficial too. Let's see. Always willing to learn. That was one thing I wanted to make sure I touched on because with me, I'm always trying to one big thing for me going into this whole agent industry, my agent career is I want to be able to have conversations with pitchers about their pitching repertoire, about their pitch grips, about their mental cues. I think that's one point that's the phase I'm in right now is in terms of learning that side of things. Obviously I know I'll never be a trainer. I know I'll never be a coach. I don't have that type of personality to do that. I don't think my knowledge of the game of baseball is that deep to watch some guy swing and be like, okay, if you change this, this is going to do this for you. Obviously, that's where I'm trying to get. And at this moment in time, that's not out of the question, but that's where I'm trying to get. Always willing to learn, whatever ends up happening to be, years down the road, if something maybe changes with a new CBA, okay, I got to read that through, see the new things that I'm trying to learn. Like I said, always sticking to my word, having great relationships with ball players, always willing to learn. And again, bringing up that Rich Paul quote up, being in the service industry and making sure that your players are taken care of. That kind of, I guess, brings up this morning. I was talking to a player's dad. Gave me a call. Like, what's going on? And he was like, "Hey, man, like, I'm trying to get so and so connected with this company. Like, do you have any connections?" I was like, "Oh, actually, I do. I've had them on the podcast before." There you go. Like, if somebody's asking you for something, you're trying your best to get that, trying your best to service them. And again, always sticking to your word. Just whatever you're telling them, you go out and do it.
Yeah, that's well said, man. That's well said. And it's awesome that you're, internalizing it, realizing it at the age you're at, still in college. I think there's, a few years older than you. I'm 27, and being 27, I see a lot of people that maybe don't stick to their word. So the fact that you've realized, these important qualities, these important life lessons so early is beneficial. You might think you're late, but man, let me tell you, like I said, I'm 27, and I see a lot of people who are not as seasoned, I would say, on the personality and integrity part than you are. So kudos to you. And I want to ask, if there's, we talked about 300 plus episodes, 8 interviews, 9 if you want to count this one. There's a lot of things you're doing. There's a lot of things you're juggling on top of your academics, friends, everything like that. Where do you find the time? How do you make the time? Like, what is your schedule or your routine, your calendar look like in order for you to fit all these in? Because inevitably things are going to pop up. Things pop up. Life happens, right? Life happened to me. I had men's league playoff game yesterday, so we had to boot this, punt it back a day. But where do you find the time? I mean, where's the balance too? I think that's something that I think everyone is trying to find that this day and age. Where's the balance between their work, their passion projects, academics, friends, the social life, stuff like that? Just give us some insight into your world when it comes to that front.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you and say that I'm constantly like I wake up in the morning, I go to the gym. Next, I don't have any free time. Like, I'm going from task to task to task. Like, obviously that's with someone who has a good work ethic, that's what you want. But is that I'm not gonna lie to you and say that that's what it is. Like, obviously, I do try to stay busy. I don't like just sitting around and every day of the week trying to watch like 3 hours of an episode or of like a TV show that I like. Like, I try to balance it that way in terms of, you talk about routine, digging into my routine. I mean, I wake up at 7 a.m., 6:45, 7 a.m., kind of depends on how I'm feeling that morning. Going to the gym. Like I said, I'm big into lifting weights, don't like cardio as much, but at this moment in time, with me being a bigger guy, kind of putting a little bit more focus on cardio than what I am hitting the weights. And then, after the gym, with me being a senior, classes aren't too difficult, and they really haven't been too difficult all 4 years. I know people always ask me, like, how did what's that transition from high school to college? I'm like, honestly, high school is probably harder than college. Obviously that depends on what your major is. Like, my roommate, he's a business major here at IU, and he's nonstop, reading textbooks, reading these different articles about different stuff, doing homework, and I'm like, what? I always wanted to get into I always wanted to be a business major, but me being a sports management major, with IU being the quote unquote number 4 sports management college in America, I really don't see it. Like, these classes aren't too difficult. Like, I'm going there, they'll maybe give us an hour of homework every week, which is kind of easy to get done. And I guess, after the whole class period, I am a liquor rep this year, trying to make a little bit of extra money to pay for groceries, pay for the, different types of stuff. So my Monday, Tuesdays are kind of booked with that as well, besides classes. But then, after 6 o'clock, like, again, like, today is kind of my day where I go through and try to schedule all the episodes for next week. So I kind of put a line in my little planner at 6 o'clock. That's where it's all baseball, all podcast stuff. always try to schedule interviews at like 6 p.m., 8 p.m., kind of knock those out of the way as well. Like I said, that's where those 8 episodes came from was, 2 on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, it was 2 on Wednesday and moved back to 3 today, you're talking about this episode. But, I guess that's kind of what my routine looks like, waking up, going to the gym, going to class, stuff like that. And again, it's not like it's like crazy nonstop. Like I have time to, just sit down, scroll through TikTok, scroll through Instagram there, do some of those fun things, maybe go out to go out for dinner couple nights a week. And again, with me being a college kid, it's my senior year, I am, going to the bars there occasionally as well. And with that being said, like I try not with, obviously this being football season as well, like I try not to schedule anything on a Saturday. Obviously I want to kind of make sure that, like I texted you the other day, like, I'm not trying to leave every Saturday and go to these different baseball tournaments. Obviously I want to hit a couple, but I'm not trying to be gone every weekend because, you only get 4 years of college, and I want to make sure next fall I'm not regretting, man, why'd I leave this weekend when Ohio State was in town or different things like that. Like, when it comes to Friday night, probably add in there as well, just in case my buddies do want to go out to eat or go out to the bar and have a little good time. I'm probably not scheduling stuff during that time as well. That's why I try to get everything knocked out Monday through Thursday through, I guess, Monday through Friday morning, Friday afternoon. Try to get everything knocked out then. I do a lot of stuff on Sundays as well. Going to the grocery store, try to get caught up on laundry on Sunday as well. And then I probably do schedule 1 or 2 episodes on a Sunday too, just to get some more knocked out there. But that's kind of like when it comes to the routine, kind of going from me time to, I guess, business time. It's kind of just, sticking to the schedule. Like I've got up here on this wall, I got September, October, November, December, just calendars right up there where I can, okay, if, let's say I got to go to Grand Park September 15th and 16th for the Puma Classic and fall national champion, fall champ, whatever it's called. Like I write those out, make sure I'm not scheduling interviews for that, or making sure that if my buddies want to go do something, I'm telling them, hey, like I'm out of town that weekend, stuff like that. Just always kind of staying on a routine. And I think that's one big thing college did for me was making sure that I stay on a routine, kind of staying ahead of schedule. Because before then, being a high school kid, obviously, you have that same set schedule, going to school 8 to 3, practice from 3 to 5:36 or whatever like that. Really don't need to plan, have a routine and plan your own stuff through a planner and calendar and stuff like that. It's one big thing college has done for me. And again, with classes not being too hard, it's probably one of the more valuable things I've learned so far here at IU is, staying on task and, having a plan and kind of sticking to a routine.
Yeah. The discipline part too. I mean, everything you had just mentioned is kind of can be all encompassed by discipline. I mean, you have interviews, you're going to stick to it. If you, just in, like you said, on a Sunday, man, you're catching up on on life things that you need to do, whether it's groceries or laundry and stuff like that. Like being able to not only have the discipline to work on a passion project and work on your career, but also the discipline to realize like, hey, I have to do these life things, or I have to be social, right? Like those things are super important too. So I think oftentimes people might say like, oh, like if you're disciplined, then you'll only kind of work on your career, you'll only work on your projects. But I think being able to take a step back too probably displays a good amount of discipline in a way. Maybe it kind of a paradox to be disciplined to not do the work. I think is also maybe a life skill there to create some balance. But
yeah, and that's I guess one other last thing. That's a big thanks to my roommates too. Like they're kind of in the same boat when it comes to like they're very motivated towards their career. So like let's say there's something going on that they need to get done, and let's say they're not. Let's say like there's 3 of us. Let's say one of them has something they need to do for their career, their internship, whatever it ends up being, and the other 2 want to go out. Like we're not gonna like solely like, oh, why aren't you going out, this and that. Like we're all kind of solely focused on our career. We understand that if there's something that needs to get done, we're going to get it done, and don't bother me, that type of stuff. I think that's very huge, and I'm super thankful for the 2 roommates that I do have, because they're kind of on that same mindset in terms of getting stuff done and not always worrying about going out like a lot of college kids do.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. Actually, I live alone, so 1-bedroom apartment here, and I think if I had a roommate that wasn't focused on maybe a passion project or something like that, then I wouldn't be, man, maybe I'd be going out every day or playing more video games than I should. So I'm easily distracted. So I think living alone has kind of helped me on that front. So it's good to hear that, you have roommates, and on top of that, that they're not only supportive, but, you're supportive of them too. What else is Jayce working on? Like, what else is JKR Baseball doing? What's the vision? What are you looking forward to? And what are you most proud of? Like, what, again, we can talk about all the episodes and everything you're putting together, but maybe it's the things that we don't see. Like we had mentioned, maybe it's just the conversations. Maybe it's the offline 20-25 minutes you're chatting with Ezra Essex. Like, maybe those are the things that you're the most proud of, or most maybe those are the most fun too, in a way. So what's the vision? What else do we need to know about JKR Baseball? And what are you most proud of?
All right, so when it comes to the vision side of things, I think that has changed a little bit, as I've kind of grown this, JKR Baseball, JKR Podcast brand. When it comes to some of those events that I'm working on, we talked about the NSCC Home Run Derby I did my senior year. Since then, have done a couple of development camps for NIL for a couple ball players in college. Summit City Baseball Academy being one. Partnered with Braden Reisdorf, who was a freshman All-American last year. Carter Matheson, who's going to sign for a lot of money this upcoming draft, and he was a freshman All-American as well. And then Traven Moss, partnering with those three, putting together a camp there in their hometown. That's kind of, that was like my second baseball event / project that I did. And after doing that, after doing Battle of Indiana as well, which I told you, I think I was telling you about that when you hopped on my episode, when you hopped on the JKR podcast. Put together Battle of Indiana, top 70 players in the state. There's very, very few Division I commits who were not there that day. Top 35 hitters, top 35 pitchers in the state. Live ABs right before the season got started. Each pitcher faced 5 hitters. Each hitter faced 5 pitchers. That was another big thing. Obviously having Max there, who brought Dan Sarmiento and Leo Rockman from Enjoy the Show. All-American Prospects was there. Youth Prospects was there, which is, Youth Prospects is a huge little baseball media brand as well. So, they all three are. But, hosting those events, that kind of that was kind of when I noticed, okay, I really enjoy hosting these events. And as I continue on with my career as an agent, I do want to continue on with both the JKR Podcast and JKR Baseball. Obviously having my podcast and then other podcasts, a part of the podcast network of JKR Baseball, having blogs as well. My buddy John Sparacco writing articles every other week about these different top ball players across the country, having him there and hopefully other articles added as well. And then that event management too. I want to run that alongside my agent career. Agent career-wise, I've had a bunch of different internships throughout my career. I've always kind of kept it as I want to do one semester with a company, learn what they're doing, and then move on to the next. Build as big as network as possible, build great relationships, but also get to see how different people do different things. Like this fall, the way that they go about scouting and the way that they go about reaching out to guys is different than the guy I worked for last fall. Both great ways, both great people, would love to work for either of them. But, everybody's different. And that was one thing that I learned. And, as I go through with my baseball agent career, whatever company that is, I think I'll be running JKR Baseball as well. And everybody I've worked for has kind of told me that's a good idea. Again, you're building connections with ball players, with top-tier coaches, top-tier organizations, guys like you and Cooper. Again, I keep bringing you guys up. But just building as many relationships as possible within the baseball industry and, hosting those events as well. Like I said, I love hosting those events, being behind the scenes, just having these cool events that when I was a high school ball player or, college, when I do some of those college events as well, like if I ever was, it'd be cool. It'd be cool as hell for me to be a part of a conference home run derby when I was a high school kid, or if I was one of those top prospects committed to a top tier program, going and facing other guys of my caliber. I put myself in their shoes and be like, okay, this would be a pretty cool event. A couple other events I got going on at this moment in time. Hoosier Home Run Derby set for October 15th at Grand Park. Top 12 returning power hitters in the state of Indiana going to be there. I already announced Jayce and Isaac Vanderwood, Notre Dame and Virginia commit there. I've got 10 more guys to announce. I believe 9 of them are committed to Power. 8 of them are committed to Power 5 schools because there was one guy who decommitted and going through that recruiting process. But absolute studs, couple guys who will be drafted within the next couple years. Really excited for that because I love watching the long ball just like everybody does. I'm really excited for that event and seeing some of those guys, put that ball over the wall and just kind of compete against each other. And they've got a couple other things. I talk about that Summit City Baseball Academy I had going on last year. The plan is to continue that. Right now, we're just trying to find a date for that. Same thing goes for an expansion of that little, development camp project, trying to expand that to Indianapolis for the Circle City Baseball Academy. I've been in the works with a couple guys from Indianapolis. Now just, again, trying to find that date for, winter break, make sure that the guys are back home, make sure they're not on campus and stuff like that. Just kind of trying to find out those logistics at the moment. And then, again, Battle of Indiana, hopefully doing that again. Should be a little bit easier this year now that I kind of know the whole, how to go about it, how to do the scheduling, because last year, I just reached out to every good ball player that I went through PBR's rankings and just reached out to a bunch of ball players. Wasn't really keeping track on a specific number of pitchers or a specific number of hitters, just reached out to them. So now I kind of, know the formula to make it a successful event like that. And with that Battle of Indiana, hopefully expanding, and I talked to Ezra about this last night, and every guy from Illinois that I get on, I kind of, shove them this, kind of throw this their way, is Battle of the Midwest. Trying to get that done, be Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Kentucky, those 5 states here around me. Obviously, when I become an agent, that's kind of the 5 states that I want to solely focus on, at least at first. I know a lot of agents have their own regions and stuff like that. So at this moment in time, I want to do Battle of the Midwest, something I'm working on right now. And as I continue on, like I said, as I continue on JKR Baseball alongside my agent career, I want to continue doing events like this. I'd love to add a couple employees and do, Battle of Texas, Battle of Florida. I've talked to about one guy who wants to come on board and do that. I guess big picture, long term, I'd love to, and this is something I've always had. Obviously, it's changed a little bit now that I'm solely focused on baseball. But I'd love to have a baseball media company running alongside an agency, years down the road. Obviously, I want to go through work for an agency and, learn underneath very experienced, very great agents first. But, long picture, would love to have like an event management company that hosts, Battle of Indiana, Battle of Illinois, and, Battle of every state, really, and the different regions and different things like that. Hosting fun events. Obviously, PBR, you guys with PBR, Perfect Game, Future Star Series, Area Code, East Coast Pro. Those are all great events. I'd love to maybe, kind of be a part of that circuit as well, long term. I know that's a very, very big goal, but would love to, again, have Battle of Missouri, Battle of Arkansas, Battle of the Southeast, different things like that. Again, same kind of concept with the home run derby. Would love to do like a state home run derby and a region home run derby in the fall when baseball season is not really going on. Same thing goes with camps. Would love to continue partnering with collegiate athletes and helping them host their own college or helping them host their own developed camps to make a little bit of NIL money, because obviously a lot of these NIL collectives aren't really throwing baseball players too much money. They're really throwing it basketball and football's way. So would love to do that, continuously helping athletes. And I think just overall, it all goes back to me being a player advocate. That's a big reason I'm trying to be an agent, is I want the best for the players, want to, best service them, give them the best experience possible. So overall, when it comes to the vision, would love to have a ton of different events, a bunch of podcast episodes. Obviously, that's something I'm always going to do until I don't know when that would stop. But I enjoy talking to these ball players. I enjoy talking to coaches. I enjoy talking to scouts like yourself, learning about their career, just, kind of digging into their mind. So podcast, going to continue that. JKR Baseball in terms of the event management, having different podcasts as part of the network and blogs, just, continue with that as well. And then again, like I said, trying to be a baseball agent. Don't know what company I'll be working for, but I'm working as hard as I possibly can to put myself in that best possible position once I do hit graduation next May. So again, that's kind of where all this stuff kind of stems from. I've always been a big dreamer, big picture type of guy. So I guess in the moment, and there was another question you asked there when it came to
Yeah, what are you
mo-
most proud of up to this point? Yeah.
yeah, so when it comes to like being like what I'm most proud of, like on the day to day, I really don't see it. But as I look back and just kind of look at it and be like, okay, like last year there was 3 guys I've talked to who've been in the first round, more guys that I've actually talked to, but 3 guys who have came on the podcast. And the class of 2024, there'll be even more. Hopefully, if everything goes right, a lot of the guys I've talked to will be drafted in that first, second, third rounder. So just looking at the big picture, kind of seeing all that, having great relationships with ball players, with scouts, with coaches, all the different types of stuff, just everything that I've built. That's kind of, I know that's maybe not what you were expecting, but just looking at the big picture, that does make me pretty proud. Like I was telling my dad that the other day, like, it's pretty cool me being from a small town. I went to a high school where it was see ball, hit ball, really nothing, like no mechanics going into it whatsoever. Going from that to where I'm at now with, my high school coach my high school coach texted me the other day and was asking me about this certain travel team a player should play for. Like my high school coach is asking me for advice. Which is pretty cool as well. Just having good relationships with guys across the country, with guys across the Midwest. Just looking at the big picture, I think that's what I'm most proud of.
Dude, that's awesome. For a number of reasons. One, I think the passion, you can hear the passion, it's evident, and that's really cool that someone is I think that's what fires me up. But again, being at the age of 27, I know a lot of people now that are kind of going through that this core life crisis type of thing. A lot of people are feeling stuck and maybe don't have a ton of things that they're super passionate about, are kind of just going through their day to day, just taking it day by day. But you're passionate about something. You have a vision. You have these goals, these things that you want to see come into fruition, and that fires me up. That's someone that I want to know, I want to be connected to, I want to talk to, I want to bounce ideas off of. Someone that I want to consume their content because they're so passionate about it, and that fires me up. So thank you for providing all that insight. And I know that what you've built up to this point. I think everything you've mentioned is completely within reach. I don't think that there's anything in there that was too crazy, that was like, well, I don't know if he can pull this off, or like, I think everything is tangible. It's you have more than enough talent, more than enough wherewithal to accomplish any of these feats. So there's 2 more I got for you. I think under this under these 2 words, I think are a lot of the things that we've talked about. Or maybe all these things that we've talked about filter up to these 2 words, and that's personal brand. Right? We've touched on that maybe briefly earlier, but how important is your personal brand, and when did you realize that? I don't know if anyone really sets out to create a personal brand. I think it just kind of comes about as we start putting these, episodes together and these projects together. It's like, okay, I'm actually the face now. Like, I am the face of this, maybe in an unintended way sometimes. So when did you realize that you were, actually the face of all these projects, and how much, responsibility do you carry that you are in charge of all these initiatives, all these projects, all these interviews? Like, you are the guy, not only behind the scenes, you're the guy in front of the camera too. So talk to me about that personal brand that you're building.
Yeah, so I mean, looking back on it, like I think I've always tried to create like a good personal brand. Again, like working in a small town with that, again, throwing it back to my parents' bar, but always having making sure I was having good relationships with the customers and stuff like that. I always wanted to make sure people knew that I was a hard worker, making sure that I was able to talk to people, have good conversations with them. At that moment in time, wasn't really thinking of quote unquote personal brand. Was really just thinking of making sure the customers thought I was a good person. Looking back on it now, same concept as a personal brand. Like you said, a lot of people don't go out to create their own personal brand. It just kind of happens. And after that, again, talking about the Grady Agent Academy, he kind of brought, that was a topic one day as well. I think kind of the same thing with, I think it was like the same lesson as he talked about the podcast. Talk about building your own personal brand. Again, like let's say when you are like reaching out to kids, their first step nowadays is probably to go look up Instagram and Twitter. Shoot, I do it sometimes too. Like let's say there's a player I want to get on, a player that's recommended. I probably go to their Instagram first before I go to their PG or PreBR or any account, just because I kind of want to see, okay, was he at area code this past year? Is he, what type of kid is he? Where's he going to high school? Different things like that. Yeah, so when I kind of realized that, and when he kind of put that topic of, like you said, like people are looking at your social media pages, I realized, okay, like I'm in college, I got to make sure I'm not posting, me doing dumb stuff as a college kid, or making sure I'm posting legit stuff that's about my life, but also making sure that I'm not doing bad things on social media. Like you see a lot of people like maybe saying bad comments or tweeting something that just could be looked back on years down the road that could be bad. Like I kind of realized, okay, like I got to make sure I'm smart, got to make sure that I am active though, because again, with these kids looking you up on social media, they want to kind of make sure who you are. And then when it comes to like throwing that into the whole JKR podcast, JKR baseball side of things, it's cool. Like I was down in Atlanta this past summer, and I'm walking up and I'm wearing this JKR shirt. Like 4 dads come up to me. They're like, "Hey man, like I appreciate you, having so and so on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Listen to your other episodes you've had about these other kids on our team. Boston Bateman, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's like I think 18th player in the 24 class. Didn't even realize he was down in Atlanta. But I'm just walking around. I get a tap on my shoulder. It's this big 6'8" guy with long curly hair. It's Boston. Just, oh, what's up, man? Didn't know you were down here. And again, Coach Brewster as well. I don't think I've given him enough love here on the podcast. Coach Brewster's done a lot for me, but I saw that he was talking to the umpire at home plate, and me and him make eye contact as I'm behind home plate. He like gave me a little, what's up nod, which is kind of cool. Again, I've had a lot of his players on the podcast, so it was cool then to, actually go and see these people in person. Drew Dickerson's one, Landon Schaefer was another one I'm thinking of just going down there, and they just, know who I am, which was pretty cool. Obviously I think that speaks well to the personal brand. Again, with Battle of Indiana, like that was one event where I met a lot of these kids in person for the first time. So it was kind of cool to everyone, going up. I knew who they were. They knew who I was. Again, that just kind of goes back to the whole personal brand side of things. So I think it's just really important to, obviously I like working behind the scenes, making sure everything's running right. But like you said, I am in front of the camera as well, having these face-to-face Zoom calls with a lot of these guys and making sure that the brand's running well. Overall, I think building your personal brand's important. And I always, obviously that's not my first point of concern when I'm doing these interviews and doing these events, but it's always in the back of my mind to make sure that, nothing dumb is being done.
Yeah. Jayce, this has been awesome. I think this is something that I think this conversation really helps the direction of where I'm trying to take this. We can see athletes, we can see coaches, we can see podcast hosts, but very rarely do we get to hear kind of what's behind the face, what's behind, the name, the podcast, the project. And you'd brought up your parents, the bar, the restaurant, on a few occasions. And I love that, because I think that describes the foundation of who you are and where this all kind of started. And that's maybe not something I'll get, on an episode, talking to you with, on an episode of JKR, but, we might get, tidbits here and there of something like that, something in your early, maybe childhood, youth days, but, being able to ask you about it and being able to kind of hear the full context, the story behind everything that you not only have going, but kind of what built, built the foundation, I think is important. That's what I'm trying to get with every guest. I want to know, I want to go a little bit deeper. So thank you for allowing me to do that with you. And I always end with one question. What makes your story so unique, but also relatable, achievable for anyone that is maybe looking up to you right now and, I want to do what he's doing, or I see the amount of work he's putting in. I see his, they might think that the producing the episodes, the content, these events are, is, well, only Jayce can do it, right? Like that guy, well, he's got a ton of connections already. Like only he can do it. I can't do it. Like there's maybe someone thinking that or will think that. How's your story, unique, but also relatable that, anyone can maybe do what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I can only hope that I'm at a point now and a point in the future where somebody can, think that, they wish they could be me. I don't, at this moment in time, don't think that's, completely yet, but I know exactly, I know what you're coming from. When it comes to, I guess, I feel like I know 330 episodes, 4 to 5 episodes a week. I know that sounds like a lot, but honestly, like again, like I don't. It's not like I'm just nonstop moving. Like I'm old. Like I'm able to sit down, relax, and stuff like that, and just going day by day, having a routine. I think that's the biggest part. Again, whenever I'm listening to some of those podcasts about entrepreneurs and listening to questions that are being thrown into different podcast guests who have $100 million businesses, they all kind of have the same type of thing that they're saying is they're regular people. They just go about, they want to make sure that they have discipline. I know that was a word that you've used quite a bit throughout the podcast. Discipline, having a routine, just going about it and having a passion. Like obviously if I hated baseball, I wouldn't be 330 episodes in on the JKR podcast. Like, whatever that passion is, just, have discipline towards it, have motivation, and always have that routine to go about it. Again, like I would love one day for me to be in a spot like Scott Boras, like Sam Samardzija, those types of guys where everyone, like a guy like me who's in college, is like, man, I want to be one of those guys one day. Obviously, again, that's a goal, a dream that I have that I hope I do end up getting to. But again, like where I'm at now, I think that it just takes a little bit of hard work, a little bit of discipline, and always kind of sticking to your word, like I talked about there during this episode as well. Just being a genuine person, I think so.
Yeah. Well, I think you're well on your way to something awesome, whether it's, being an agent. I think life has this weird way of kind of putting something in your path that maybe was not expected. I think you're doing a lot of things that, yeah, I hope you achieve whatever you want to achieve. But even if you don't, I know that at the end of the day, if you have the passion, the drive, the motivation, discipline that you're already exuding, that wherever you end up is going to be, I think you'll find, fulfillment out of it. So I'm pumped that we've been connected. Looking forward to the relationship growing here and being a resource for you. Hopefully by now I have enough pull in the industry or at least my job to help you out whenever I can. So, man, I appreciate it, and I think this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I thank you for everything, kind of, giving me that platform to kind of dig into who I am, how the JKR Baseball brand, started to where it's built now, digging into kind of my vision for the future, and just kind of digging into who I am as a person. Again, you talked about that personal brand and how, when athletes, let's say down the road when I'm reaching out to athletes, maybe this is a podcast people are listening to kind of get to know who I am. So, I'm not the biggest guy on talking about myself. Again, like you said, as the podcast host, like you're talking probably 10% of the time of the actual podcast. So it was a little weird here today, kind of flipping that around and doing probably 90% of the talking compared to the 10%. But again, super thankful for this opportunity, super thankful for everything you've done for me so far. And, like you said, I hope we continue to build this relationship. And, as I go along with my baseball career, you go along with your baseball career as well. We continue to build this relationship and keep helping each other out.